Have you ever wondered what it's like to live with the certainty that a serial killer was never caught? That he might still be alive, watching, listening, laughing? In the late 1960s, while the United States was undergoing major cultural shifts, a new kind of horror began to spread across the California coast. This wasn't some mythological monster. He was real, and he signed his crimes with a symbol, a circle with a cross through it, the Zodiac, a name that would become synonymous with fear, criminal arrogance, and unsolvable riddles. He didn't just kill. He wrote to the press, mocked the police, and encrypted his identity in messages that stumped even the world's top experts. This video isn't just another recap. It's a deep dive into the darkness of a psychopath's mind, a rich analysis of the crimes, the victims, and the many theories that still surround his identity today. If you think you already know this story, get ready to question everything. And if you've never heard of it, be careful, because it might haunt you for a long time. Because this is the case of the Zodiac. Welcome to Urban Hauntings. Here, we dive deep into intriguing stories, real-life mysteries, and documentaries designed to make you think. Our mission is to bring you high-quality content, thoroughly researched and told in a way that keeps you hooked from start to finish. But for this channel to keep growing and delivering more powerful stories, we need you to take part. Share your opinions, drop your theories, and engage in the comments. Your voice helps shape every video we make. Like this video to help us reach more people and grow this community of fans passionate about real crime and paranormal stories. Share it with your friends and family to spread our work and bring more people into the channel. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single story. Every like and every share makes a huge difference. With your support, we can make this one of the biggest channels dedicated to this kind of content. Now, no more stalling. Let's get into today's story. It was the end of innocence in the United States. The optimism of the 1960s was starting to crack under the weight of a new shadow creeping across the cold California nights. And that shadow had a name: Zodiac. Even before the term serial killer became part of everyday vocabulary, he was already writing letters soaked in cynicism, demanding front-page coverage, and threatening to launch a crazy killing spree if ignored. The terror didn't come from dark alleyways. It came in sealed envelopes filled with cryptograms and promises of blood. The Zodiac became a dark legend, not just because of the murders, but because of how he manipulated public attention. His acts went beyond brutal killings. They included a psychological game with the press and police. Like a twisted artist, he crafted his fame with threatening words and cryptic symbols. His vanity was undeniable. He wanted to be seen, feared, decoded, but never caught. His audacity was so extreme that he compared himself to a superior predator, hunting humans for fun. In a cipher cracked by the Harden family, he confessed, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. More fun than killing wild game in the forest." The mind behind those words wasn't seeking redemption or forgiveness. It wanted an audience. It craved the power to defy social order and carve its name into the collective memory. Even today, criminologists consider him a turning point in the history of crime in the United States. Before the Zodiac, killers hid. After him, they signed their murders with arrogance and theatrics. His legacy inspired characters like Hannibal Lecter and John Doe, and his hunger for attention paved the way for a new breed of media-obsessed psychopaths. The Zodiac's cold precision and pathological need for recognition didn't just make him a symbol of modern evil. They also delivered a chilling warning. What fuels killers like him might be our fascination, our eyes glued to the horror. His victims never seemed random. Young couples in love caught in intimate moments. Those were his favorite prey. Quiet nights, secluded lookout points, forests just off country roads, ordinary places for romantic escapes, until they were turned into scenes of death. To the Zodiac, loneliness and darkness were the perfect allies. He didn't hunt in dangerous alleyways. He hunted in the sacred spaces of carefree youth. Each attack felt orchestrated with ritualistic cruelty. Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, Lake Berryessa, names that still echo with darkness. David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were his first confirmed victims. A young couple with promise, stopped cold by bullets. She tried to run. He never left the car. The killer stalked, watched, then performed his deadly dance. In July 1969, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau followed the same tragic script. A parked car, whispered conversation, then headlights approaching, a man with a flashlight, and a 9mm pistol. The shots rang out like thunder. Michael barely survived. Darlene wasn't so lucky. And just like a horror movie written to perfection, the killer called the police minutes later. Calm, methodical, almost bored. At Lake Berryessa, his sadism escalated. Shooting wasn't enough anymore. Now he used a knife. He tied them up, watched them, stabbed them. Dressed in black with his symbol on his chest, he looked like a nightmare straight out of medieval times. Again, the pattern repeated. The man survived. The woman died. Was it coincidence? Or was there a deeper hatred, a need to dominate female figures? This behavior led to intense psychological profiling. A killer who didn't choose victims by race or age, but by situation, by convenience, and maybe by aesthetic. Because to the Zodiac, murder wasn't just an act, it was a performance, and each victim was part of his dark stage play. The Zodiac's methods were as varied as they were terrifying. He wasn't predictable. Sometimes he shot, other times he stabbed. In one case, he left the bodies in plain sight. In another, he carved dates and weapons into a car like he was signing his masterpiece. No fixed pattern, just the constant fear. That made him more dangerous. How do you catch someone who reinvents his own ritual with each crime? But one thing never changed. The letters, threats, demands, ciphers. He wrote like he was playing with the readers, like the world was his chessboard, and he was the master. In one letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, he sent a blood-stained piece of Paul Stein's shirt, the murdered taxi driver, a chilling trophy. "This is the Zodiac speaking," he wrote, etching his voice into America's nightmares forever. And the ciphers? His final twist. 4 coded messages. 3 of them remained unsolved for decades. In 2020, one finally cracked open, revealing a haunting message. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I have enough slaves to work for me in paradise." A cold, casual tone, but it made his motives crystal clear. Power, control, and a deranged belief in an afterlife where he reigned supreme. The police and the press became supporting actors in his twisted play. He demanded his letters be published, or else he'd unleash another wave of killings. It was as if, more than killing, he wanted to be heard, as if the real crime was the silence in the face of his vanity. And even with all those signs, he remained a mystery, a killer who communicated with the world, who seemed to want to be caught, yet always vanished just one step ahead. A psychopath with the soul of a writer, a murderer with a thirst for applause. Decades went by, the letters stopped, the trail went cold, but the mystery never died. In October 2024, Netflix reignited the fire, and with it, the fear. A deep, detailed, and disturbing documentary series brought not just the crimes back into focus, but also the most recent and daring theories about who the Zodiac really was. And this time, the series pointed to a name. With a cinematic investigation feel, the episodes recreated the murders with visual and emotional precision. Interviews with detectives, surviving victims, and criminologists revealed new connections. Forgotten locations were revisited, old case files reopened. Viewers watched in silence as if witnessing a summoning, bringing back to life a ghost that never truly rested. The impact was immediate. Forums exploded with theories. Amateur sleuth websites began reanalyzing audio clips, images, and dates. A group of independent investigators called the Casebreakers pointed to Gary Francis Poste as the alleged killer. While authorities remained skeptical, the seed of doubt had been planted. And as with everything related to the Zodiac, doubt is the most powerful weapon. The series also dove into the inner workings of the investigation, revealing mistakes, omissions, and infighting among police departments. Revelations about potentially forged letters, overlooked suspects, and media manipulation added another layer of tension. This wasn't just about a killer. It was about a systemic failure, a crack in the very foundation of justice. The true legacy of the documentary wasn't just to entertain, but to reopen old wounds, to remind the world that the Zodiac might never have really left, and worse, that he might not have acted alone, because when the truth is fragmented, any piece might be the last or the most misleading. The Zodiac didn't just kill people, he murdered the peace of an entire generation. His psychological impact echoed through the decades, reshaping how the public perceives evil. He became a symbol, a faceless presence that feeds off collective fear. a monster that hides between the lines of coded letters and the failures of justice. No matter how much time passes, the Zodiac never truly disappears. Cinema was one of the first to feed off that dark legacy. The acclaimed 2007 film Zodiac, directed by David Fincher, perfectly captured the investigator's obsession and the hopeless maze the case became. But it wasn't just the movie. TV series, books, podcasts, and video games continued to draw inspiration from the killer. He stopped being just a criminal. He became a cultural entity, a symbol of uncertainty. To modern criminology, the Zodiac case remains essential. No fixed pattern. A master manipulator of the media. A crystal-clear craving for public recognition. It all points to a narcissistic, strategic type of psychopath. A profile that echoes in other infamous names like BTK and the Unabomber. They all drank from the same source, the deadly theatrics of the Zodiac. More than that, he gave rise to a parallel investigative culture. Amateur detectives, YouTubers, independent forensic analysts, all trying to solve what the system failed to. The internet became fertile ground for speculation and reanalysis. The myth grew, and with it, the realization that the truth might never come to light, or worse, that when it does, it won't be easily accepted, because the Zodiac is more than a name. He's a void, a distorted reflection of human curiosity, and as long as his ciphers remain unsolved, as long as his identity remains in the shadows, he keeps winning. A blind spot in American justice, a ghost that haunts each new generation. Between bullets and knives, the Zodiac wielded a more perverse weapon, his mind. He didn't just kill with his hands, he killed with codes. On August 1st, 1969, 3 California newspapers received nearly identical letters. Inside each envelope was a section of a 408-character cipher. The letters came with threats and a clear warning. Publish this, or there will be more blood. It was the beginning of a deadly decoding game. The content of the first cipher, cracked by an amateur husband and wife team, sent chills down the spine of American society. I like killing people because it is so much fun. It's more fun than killing wild game in the forest. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The words were raw, cynical, and sick. He called himself a supreme predator, hunting for pleasure. But the most disturbing part was at the end. He claimed his victims would become his slaves in the afterlife. This was beyond vanity. It was a twisted, almost ritualistic belief. His obsession with codes didn't stop. On November 8, 1969, he sent another cipher, this one 340 characters long. For decades, it went unsolved, until December 2020, when 3 civilians, 1 American, 1 Belgian, and 1 Australian, announced they had cracked it. It didn't contain his name as he had once promised. Instead, it was filled with mockery. I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber. It was as if the Zodiac was taunting the entire nation. But 2 of the 4 ciphers have never been solved. One of them, the so-called Z13, is rumored to contain his real name. To this day, it remains a silent, maddening code, a challenge, a smirk from behind the curtain. My name is, followed by a string of undecipherable characters. Was he lying, or hiding the truth in plain sight? What makes these codes even more fascinating and terrifying is the possibility that the Zodiac used military-grade ciphers mixed with chaos to prevent anyone from cracking them. It shows a level of sophistication beyond the average. He didn't just want to commit crimes. He wanted to be an eternal mystery. And to this day, that's exactly what he is. The Zodiac wasn't just a killer. He was an archetype, a psychological profile that defied the norms of his time and still confounds experts today. What drives someone to kill, write about it with clinical detachment, and then demand to be published? The answer begins with a dark diagnosis: antisocial personality disorder, pathological narcissism, and obsessive control behavior. His relationship with the public was a performance. He wanted to be feared, but also decoded. He wanted his mind to be the true stage for horror. His pleasure didn't come from the act of murder alone. It came from the aftermath, from being at the center of a narrative he controlled, a psychopath with literary vanity and a hunger for the spotlight. His attacks, though seemingly chaotic, followed a strategic logic. Secluded areas, vulnerable couples, nighttime hours, the use of different weapons, the introduction of symbols, the constant change of methods. pointed to someone who mastered unpredictability as a weapon. He was methodical, yet staged chaos to confuse. Every attack, every letter, was a premeditated move in a game that only he understood. To analysts, his sexuality has long been a point of speculation. In every case where there was a female victim, she was killed. The men survived. Coincidence? Maybe not. Paul Avery, the journalist who was once threatened by the killer, even suggested the possibility of repressed homosexuality, masked by a deep misogyny disguised as sadism. The desire to humiliate, punish, and dominate women seemed to echo through the Zodiac's patterns and methods. In the end, the most terrifying thing about the Zodiac isn't just what he did, it's what he thought. The idea of collecting slaves for the afterlife, paired with a complete lack of empathy, reveals a fragmented but highly functional mind. A man who walked among us, masked as a regular citizen, and who may have died without ever confessing, because to him the game was never about justice. It was always about power. From the very beginning of the investigation, one name lingered over the Zodiac case like a shadow: Arthur Leigh Allen, a former schoolteacher, fired for misconduct with students, a loner obsessed with weapons, puzzles, and children. He seemed to check every box, but fitting the profile isn't the same as proving guilt. And in the world of the Zodiac, suspicion was never enough. Allen was questioned multiple times. His name first came up through a friend, who reported disturbing conversations. Allen spoke about wanting to kill couples, invent a nickname, and use a flashlight to blind his victims. The similarities to the Zodiac's methods were disturbing. He even wore a Zodiac brand watch, lived near the crime scenes, and had a history of abuse. And yet, he was never formally charged. In 1974, he was arrested for molesting a young boy. He served 2 years. When he got out, he was marked, not by justice, but by suspicion. Police raided his home more than once. They found typewriters, weapons, newspaper clippings, but nothing definitive. No handwriting match, no DNA, no letters. He died in 1992, possibly taking the truth to his grave. In 2002, a DNA test from the Zodiac's letters showed Allen was not a match. But there was a catch. The DNA had been taken from the outside of the envelope, not beneath the seal. That raised doubts. And in the Zodiac universe, doubts are fuel. A forensic expert once said, "I reviewed boxes of Allen's writings. Nothing, absolutely nothing, matched the Zodiac." Despite the lack of hard evidence, Arthur Leigh Allen remains the prime suspect in pop culture. Films, documentaries, and books place him at the center of the case. Maybe because we need a face for evil. Maybe because the real killer never gave us one. It was an ordinary night in March 1970. Kathleen Johns was driving down a deserted road in California, her young daughter asleep in the back seat. The silence of the night was broken by a car flashing its high beams behind her. The driver signaled that something was wrong with her wheel. Nervous but still trusting in humanity, she pulled over. That was the beginning of her nightmare. The man seemed helpful. He said he'd tighten the lug nuts, but what he actually did was loosen them. A few miles down the road, the wheel fell off. Kathleen and her daughter were left stranded. The man offered them a ride. With a child in her arms and no other options, she accepted. That's when the most terrifying ride of her life began. For over 90 minutes, the man drove aimlessly in circles. His voice was cold, menacing. He said he would kill Kathleen, but not before throwing her baby out the window. Every word raised the stakes. Then, in a moment of pure survival, she acted. As he slowed to take a curve, she opened the door and leapt from the moving car, clutching her daughter. She ran, crawled, and hid in the dark. The man stopped, searched, drove around, but never found them. Kathleen remained hidden until the road fell silent again. Hours later, shaken and bruised, she arrived at the police station. When she saw the Zodiac sketch, she didn't hesitate. It was him, the same face, the same eyes, the man who nearly destroyed her life. That incident was never officially tied to the Zodiac. There was no letter, no confession, but the method, the threats, the chilling demeanor, they were all too familiar. And for many investigators, that kidnapping offered a rare window into what he was like without a weapon in hand. A psychological predator, a control-obsessed hunter. The Zodiac knew that fear traveled faster than blood. That's why his most powerful weapon wasn't a gun or a knife. It was his letters. Between 1969 and 1974, he sent a series of cryptic, threatening messages to newspapers like the San Francisco Chronicle. always demanding publication, always pushing boundaries. It was as if the world had to hear what he had to say, or suffer the consequences. These letters weren't just messages. They were theatrical displays of dominance. Some contained unbreakable ciphers. Others shared details only the killer could know. In one, he included a blood-soaked piece of Poste's shirt. Undeniable proof. In another, he mocked the police. Me, Basha 37, SFPD, 0. A twisted scoreboard of death. By sending these letters, the Zodiac created a parasitic relationship with the media. He gave them headlines. They gave him a stage. It was a sick cycle. The more attention he got, the bolder he became. A psychopath who fully understood how to manipulate public opinion, and more importantly, how to use journalism as a megaphone for his diseased ego. The tone of his letters shifted, sometimes aggressive and blunt, other times poetic and sarcastic. Like the Halloween letter he sent to journalist Paul Avery, where he wrote, "You ache to know my name. I'll clue you in, but why spoil the game? A game." To him, everything was a game. The press, the police, the victims, they were all pawns on a board that only he could see. To this day, many of those letters remain archived, analyzed, and debated. The handwriting, the stamps, the carefully chosen words. Each letter is a time capsule of terror, written by someone who didn't just want to kill, but to be remembered for it. And he succeeded. On the night of October 11, 1969, the Zodiac left behind the lookouts and forested crime scenes. He stepped into the heart of San Francisco, urban, watched, alive. His target, Paul Stein, a 29-year-old cab driver. The passenger climbed in near Presidio Heights and asked to be taken to Washington and Maple. But before they got there, he calmly gave another instruction: go one more block. Then he pulled the trigger. At point-blank range, a single, fatal shot to the head. Paul died instantly, but the horror didn't end there. The killer tore off part of the victim's shirt as a trophy. He wiped down the cab, erasing prints. Then he calmly walked away. Just a few feet away, 3 teenagers saw it all from their window and called the police. But the dispatch described the suspect as a black man. A fatal error. Minutes later, 2 officers, Don Fook and Eric Zelms, passed a white man walking calmly down the street. He wasn't stopped. He slipped right past them. Maybe in that moment the Zodiac looked into the eyes of the men hunting him and smiled. Days later, a new letter arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle. Inside was a piece of Paul Stein's shirt and details about the crime that had never been made public. It was proof. It was him. And now, the panic escalated. For the first time, he had killed in the middle of the city, in a residential neighborhood. The message was clear: I can be anywhere. I can be anyone. The Stein case changed everything. The police now knew they were facing someone far bolder than they had imagined. A killer who defied logic, broke all protocols and crossed every line. A man who killed with his hands and with his words. And on that day, he showed the world that his game was far from over. While Arthur Leigh Allen's name dominated suspicion, he was never the only one. The Zodiac case, surrounded by uncertainties and investigative failures, attracted an entire gallery of suspects over the decades. Men with dark pasts, strange behaviors, or eerie coincidences. The mystery of the Zodiac became a national obsession, and any face could suddenly become the next alleged killer. In 2021, a group of independent investigators called the Case Breakers claimed to have solved the case. According to them, the Zodiac was Gary Francis Poste, a military veteran with a violent history. They alleged that his DNA matched evidence from the crime scenes and that hidden messages had been discovered in photographs. But the FBI and the Vallejo Police Department dismissed the claims. To the authorities, it was just another theory without hard proof. Other names came into the spotlight at different times. Richard Gaikowski, an eccentric San Francisco journalist, was accused in a TV program after a witness recognized his voice. Jack Tarrance was denounced by his own stepson, who claimed to have found hoods and objects similar to those used by the Zodiac. But again, no solid evidence. Retired Detective Steve Hodel took it even further. He accused his own father, George Hodel, also a suspect in the Black Dahlia case, of being the Zodiac. His theory, supported by stylistic and symbolic comparisons, was met with skepticism. Others suggested names like Louis Myers, Robert Ivan Nichols, and even the Unabomber, Theodore Kaczynski, all with weak connections. all part of the growing folklore. In the end, perhaps the Zodiac's greatest legacy was just that, the creation of an unsolvable maze, a riddle that fuels fear, but also hope, the hope that someday, somewhere, someone will fit the final piece into place. Until then, anyone could be the Zodiac. Before Lake Herman Road, before the taunting letters, there may have been another crime, a forgotten, isolated murder, but one hauntingly familiar. On October 30th, 1966, Sherry Jo Bates, an 18-year-old student at Riverside City College, was found dead, brutally stabbed and nearly decapitated. The initial investigation found no suspects, until years later, when Paul Avery received a tip that changed everything. An anonymous letter sent to the local police and media described details that had never been made public. The style matched the Zodiac, so did the handwriting. The message included chilling verses and the phrase, "She was not the first, and she will not be the last." On a campus bathroom wall, someone had written, "She died. I am not sick. I am insane. At the stroke of midnight, I choked her." The signature, a symbol strikingly similar to the one the Zodiac would later use. The modus operandi also raised red flags: nighttime ambush, premeditated attack, use of a knife, and a letter filled with taunts. Police reopened the case, but never officially linked it to the Zodiac. There was no conclusive evidence, no DNA, and perhaps no will to admit that the killer's path began even earlier than believed. Still, many independent investigators believe the Bates case was the Zodiac's true first act, a bloody rehearsal, a criminal baptism. From that moment on, he refined his signature, adopted the Zodiac alias, and expanded his game of public manipulation. Sherry Jo's death may have been the awakening of a mind that found pleasure in control, in violence, and in being watched. If true, then history must be rewritten, because the monster didn't emerge from nowhere in 1968. He was already out there, watching, waiting, maybe even writing. On September 6, 1970, Donna Lass vanished without a trace. A young, beautiful nurse, she left her job at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel Casino and was never seen again. Her car was found parked at her apartment complex, untouched. No signs of struggle, no blood, no clues. The night had swallowed Donna whole, and the silence begged for answers. 6 months later, an eerie postcard was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. Newspaper clippings formed ominous phrases: "Sought victim 12, peek through the pines," around Lake Tahoe areas. The sender? Supposedly the Zodiac, but this time there was no handwriting, no cipher, just vague hints, as if the mystery itself was the crime. And yet the style felt familiar, the threatening tone, the theatrical flair, the misleading clues, all trademarks of the Zodiac. But with no body, no physical evidence, the case was filed away as a disappearance. And once again, doubt became the Zodiac's ally. He no longer needed blood to spread fear. A single letter was enough. Later investigations never established a solid connection between Donna and the Zodiac's earlier victims. Still, her name is a constant in unofficial victim lists. The pattern was there. Young woman, vanished at night, remote setting, and most of all, a killer willing to turn a disappearance into a spectacle. Whether Donna was a victim of the Zodiac or not, the world may never know, but the doubt remains. A cruel reminder that sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't finding a body, it's never finding one at all. January 30th, 1974. After a long silence, the Zodiac wrote again, but this time the letter was different, less technical, more mocking. Addressed to the San Francisco Chronicle, the killer offered a movie review. "I just watched The Exorcist. It was the best satirical comedy I've ever seen. Pure mockery, as if laughing at fear, as if to say, I'm still here, laughing at you." At the bottom of the letter, a chilling tally. Mia 37 SFPD 40, 37 deaths, 37 ghosts haunting a police department that had made 0 arrests. No suspects, just corpses, chaos, and cryptic letters. The killer's arrogance overflowed. But this time, something felt different, almost tired, like an actor ready to exit the stage, still craving one last round of applause. The letter also included a distorted version of the Zodiac symbol, surrounded by crosses and circles. Cryptic, nonsensical. Was it another puzzle? A bluff? or the final message of a monster who knew he'd never be unmasked? The truth is, after this letter, the trail began to fade, and the legend only grew stronger. Though controversial, many experts believe this letter was genuine. The handwriting matched. The style was unmistakable, but the tone, that was different. No cipher, no direct threats. It was as if the Zodiac was finished, or fulfilled, as if he knew he had already won. Because his greatest crime was not the murders themselves, but the legacy of fear he left behind. This letter is considered by many to be the Zodiac's final true manifestation, a laugh echoing in the dark, the closing curtain of a bloody performance that, to this day, no one has been able to end. 8 years after the last official letter, a new correspondence arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle. The date, April 24th, 1978. Its content, threats, taunts, and yet another Zodiac symbol. But something felt off. The letter seemed forced. The tone imitated. The signature, too theatrical, even for him. That's when the rumors began. Was it a fake? Journalist Armistead Maupin made a bold accusation. He claimed that Inspector Dave Toschi, the same man who inspired the lead character in the film Zodiac, might have forged the letter himself. Maupin said Toschi had previously written anonymous letters to the paper, praising his own work and trying to steer the narrative. Now he supposedly tried to reignite interest in the case he'd spent nearly a decade investigating. The investigation was intense. Toschi was removed from the case. The press went wild. The public was split. Still, official handwriting analysis found no definitive link between Toschi and the 1978 letter. Sherwood Merrill, a nationally respected handwriting expert, stated with confidence, "The writing was the Zodiac's. The envelope matched too. And yet, the shadow of doubt remained. Some believe the letter was a flawless imitation by a devoted Zodiac admirer. Others insist the killer himself, older and weaker, may have attempted a comeback. What everyone agrees on is that the letter reignited the debate, fueled new theories, and brought the case back into the spotlight. The Zodiac, or his legend, had returned. Authentic or not, that letter marked the final recorded outburst of the figure who terrorized California. And like everything in this case, it offered no certainty. Just another layer of fog, another provocation, and a question that still lingers. Did the Zodiac really vanish, or just adapt to the silence? Behind the codes and ciphers, there were people, faces, dreams, futures cut short. The Zodiac claimed 37 victims, but only 7 have been officially confirmed by authorities, a small number for the fear he unleashed. Each of those victims has a story, and each one leaves behind an unanswered question. The first were Betty Lou Jensen, 16, and David Faraday, 17, shot to death on Lake Herman Road, December 20th, 1968. She tried to run, but collapsed beside the car. He was executed at point-blank range inside the vehicle. Young, in love, parked at a lover's lane. A night of romance turned into a crime scene, the beginning of a nightmare. Next came Darlene Ferrin, 22, and Michael Mageau, 19, shot in the parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park on July 4th, 1969. She died. He survived, and lived to describe the killer's face. The Zodiac called the police 30 minutes later, calmly confessing. No panic, no rush, just a task completed. On September 27th, 1969, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were attacked at knife point at Lake Berryessa. He survived, stabbed 8 times in the back. She died after 24 stab wounds. The killer wore a black hood, the Zodiac symbol on his chest. He wrote the dates of his crimes on the car door, his signature drawn in blood. The last confirmed victim was Paul Stein, a San Francisco taxi driver, executed with a gunshot to the head on October 11, 1969. Days later, a piece of his shirt was mailed to the newspaper. The city panicked. The killer was now operating in urban territory, and he was still free. These names are more than numbers. They are the human echoes of a real-life horror story, and each one of them cries out for something that never came: justice. To the police, the Zodiac left behind 7 confirmed victims, but for many investigators and theorists, that number is just the surface. Beneath it lies a web of unsolved murders, mysterious disappearances, and chilling coincidences, cases with far too many similarities to ignore, crimes that, even today, await answers. On June 4, 1963, Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards were found dead on a beach near Gaviota. shot with a .22 caliber rifle. Their bodies were bound with ropes eerily similar to those used in the Berryessa attack. No notes, no confession, but the pattern, for many, was undeniable. 3 years later, in Riverside, Sherry Jo Bates was brutally murdered with a knife, her body left near the college library. Days later, letters began arriving, taunting, sarcastic, confessional. The handwriting? Familiar. The phrasing? Strikingly similar. But police never confirmed a link, and the case faded into history as a forgotten prologue to the Zodiac's carnage. In 1970, Donna Lass vanished in Lake Tahoe. Her car was found untouched. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, just a chilling postcard sent to the press, suggesting the Zodiac had taken her. The letter was never proven authentic, and Donna's body was never found, but the silence of her disappearance still echoes today. Other suspected victims include possible connections to murders in Nevada, Southern California, and even neighboring states. Some have linked the Zodiac to the monster of Florence, others to the Unabomber himself. Theories are endless. Proof is not. And that absence is what keeps the doubt alive. Because maybe the Zodiac's true legacy isn't just what he did, but everything he might have done that we never uncovered. Decades have passed. Witnesses aged, detectives retired, but the Zodiac lives on, not in flesh, but in memory. In every internet forum, in every late-night documentary, in every theory typed out under dim light. Why does this case, out of so many, still grip the public imagination? Because it's both a puzzle and a mirror. The Zodiac combined physical terror with emotional manipulation. Yes, he killed, but what set him apart was how he wrote about it, how he used words to wound as deeply as bullets. He wanted to be feared, but more than anything, he wanted to be remembered. And he was. He became a reference, a movie plot, a headline, a lecture topic, a podcast character, a villain who never needed a face to be terrifying. Part of the fascination lies in the mystery. A killer who was never identified, who spoke in codes, who openly challenged the system, who may have stopped by choice, or maybe never stopped at all. This lack of closure makes the case feel alive, always open, always unsettling. An echo that returns with every rediscovered letter, every new suspect, every cipher re-examined. Another element is the fear of the invisible, the kind of evil that doesn't scream, doesn't run, just walks quietly among us with an ordinary face. The Zodiac wasn't some cartoonish figure. He could have been a neighbor, a co-worker, a teacher, a father. That's the purest kind of terror, knowing that monsters can wear ties and pay their taxes. And maybe deep down, the Zodiac represents something more frightening than death itself, meaninglessness. Because there was no motive, no clear pattern, just darkness, and someone who understood it perfectly. The Zodiac case isn't just an unsolved crime. It's an open wound in the history of the United States, a scar that cuts across generations, that defies logic, justice, and even our very concept of evil. Because the Zodiac didn't kill out of revenge, passion, or greed. He killed for vanity. He killed because he could, because he wanted to be remembered, and he succeeded. Not by his face, we never saw it. Not by his name, we never knew it. But by the feeling he left behind. That truth can be buried beneath ciphers. That silence can scream louder than a gunshot. That sometimes, the police don't win, and the monster wins, simply by disappearing. Even today, some questions refuse to die. Who was he? How many did he really kill? And, perhaps the most disturbing, was he still alive when he watched the documentaries made in his name? When he heard the theories? When he read the papers and saw that he had become a legend? Or is he still alive now, somewhere out there, smiling in the dark? Because the terror of the Zodiac isn't just in what he did, it's in what he represents. A faceless mystery, a letter never opened, a shadow that even without a body continues to follow us. And maybe it always will.